Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Born from Sin. I hope that you're doing well today and that you've had a great week. I have had a little bit of I'm going to say a bit of a weird week. Today's episode, I decided that I would share a little bit more about my journey of healing from my mom's story. At the age of 4, I started being abused sexually by my father. And at the age of 4, my mom started questioning whether or not the sexual abuse was going on. And she was a very protective mother, as much as she could be when I was young. She always sat me down and had a very gentle as possible conversation with me, considering that I was only like 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. And she tried to ask me questions on whether or not, my father was touching me or hurting me or being inappropriate with me in a kid's language, something that I could understand. And I always said no because I was petrified of my father, and rightfully so. Any time that my dad sexually abused me, he would always say afterwards that no one would believe me if I told them, that if I did, it would break up our family. He would tell me things like, if I told anybody, especially my mom, that he would kill us both. And my dad was a very violent man. He showed up at my 5th birthday with a shotgun and tried to kill me and my mother. So I didn't question or doubt when he told me that he would kill my mom and I, or that no one would believe me after he abused me. So for years, when my mom questioned me, I always said no until I turned 11 years old, and I finally spoke up and told my mom that my dad had been abusing me from the age of 4 until 11. She didn't hesitate once to say that we would be okay, that she would take care of it, and that she believed what I was telling her. She even went and contacted the police and had my father charged and had him removed from our home to protect me and to protect her. Then we ended up going to court, and that was a whole traumatic experience for both my mother and I, to have to go on the stand and talk about who my father really was and how much abuse that he had put us through. Shortly after my dad was sentenced to 18 months in jail, my mom attempted suicide for the very first time. And from the age of 11 until I was in my 30s, my mom tried to commit suicide on a very regular basis. It was a lot of her being okay and then her crashing and burning out of nowhere. Then there was a lot of times throughout the years that the warning signs became noticeable. So she would be on her medication. We'd have, 2, 3 good months together. Then all of a sudden she'd kind of start going into this depression or not being herself. And I knew that something was going to happen. I knew that it was one of those, I was going to get a phone call, or someone was going to knock at my door, or a teacher was going to pull me out of class to let me know that my mom had tried to commit suicide again. For years, I tried to figure out why my mom was the way that she was. It was very confusing as a child to grow up with someone that tried so hard to protect you, but that didn't want to be around you at the same time. It's like I was a constant reminder of her past. And I get it now. It took me years to figure that part out because of my mom and dad being biological brother and sister, because of the hell that my dad put my mom through before I even came into the picture, then the hell that he put us through, the abuse that I went through, the torment that she went through, and I can't tell you how many times my mom has ended up in the hospital because of my father abusing her. Like, the woman went through hell and back, and then she woke up every morning looking at my face, knowing that I was a product of their secret. The constant reminder of the torment that my father put her through before I even came along. And I wonder sometimes if that was not the reason that triggered her schizophrenia and made her depression worse some days. When she was on her medication and she was thinking straight, she was a great mom. She really was. She went above and beyond for me in so many ways. She did her very best to step up and be the mom that she didn't have the opportunity to be while my dad was around. And for the most part, she did great. Like, I have no complaints. I had a lot of good memories with my mom. It was nothing for her to throw a weekend party and just invite a bunch of people over, and it became like a weekend ritual where everybody hung out at our place. So my teenage years were a lot of fun. And then we had a falling out when I was about 18, 19 years old. And I moved out, and that's when I was engaged to be married for the first time. And she just kept telling me that I was making a mistake and that I should, it was okay to be engaged, but to wait longer to get married because we were just, you know, we were engaged in October and we wanted to get married the following January. We had just started dating in August. So we had a falling out, and I literally had a fist fight with my mom. Like, it was crazy. And then I went and I lived on my own, and she went and helped pay for my first and last month's rent so that I wasn't living in a boarding house. She helped me, get my first apartment. She helped me furnish it. She helped me get dishes and fill my fridge even after we had that falling out. So again, it's not that she wasn't a good mom, because she was. It was a schizophrenic mom that was a struggle for me. The one that would be okay one minute, I would go to school, and then there'd be a knock on the door from a teacher pulling me out of class to let me know that someone was going to be picking me up to bring me to the hospital because my mom had just tried to kill herself. It was the times that I had to go sit in a mental institute that my mom was in and pretend like I was okay, like everything was all right, like nothing had happened. And that was on a good day. On a bad day was after she had shock therapy, and I was forced to sit there talking to a woman that had no idea who I was, screamed and yelled at me because she said that she was not my mother, that I was lying to her, that I was not her child, and pretend to be okay at the age of 12. Try and reach out and hold her hand and say, Mom, it's me. Mom, it's okay. Only to have her pull away. Left me with a lot of abandonment issues. Being bounced around from one foster home to the next while Mom was on, her down days that lasted forever. I was in a foster home one time for a year and a half. That was my longest stretch in a foster home. Thankfully, it was a really good one, but it wasn't supposed to be that long. But because of Mom and because of her schizophrenia, at each new stage, we went from it being 1 month to 3 months, and then it went from 3 to 6, from 6 to a year, and then from a year to a year and a half, because that's how much treatment she needed to be able to get back on her feet, to fight with Children's Aid to get me back. And she did. She did it all. And it was at that point that I figured, okay, we're past that hump that we need to be past, and everything from here on out is going to be smooth sailing. Everything from here on out is going to be a lot better. We moved to Sudbury, Ontario in 1986. I was 13 going on 14. I met my very best friend, Chantal. My mom was in, was starting a long-term relationship with her significant other. She was lesbian at the time, and life was as normal as it could be. My dad was no longer around. We were free from a lot of things, and that kept Mom on the straight and narrow, and it kept her from feeling suicidal. And then Dad reappeared in our lives and crash and burn. Mom ends up trying to commit suicide again, ends up back in the hospital again. I end up back in foster care. 3, 4 months later, I'm back home. And it continued for probably about another year or so. And then I had the falling out with her. I moved out. She straightened out her life and got back to where she needed to be, and again helped me the way that she always did when she was on her medication and thinking like a normal human being and not like a schizophrenic mother. Then I got married, and our lives kind of separated for a little bit. She moved with her significant other out to Newfoundland, and I was still in Ontario at that time. I found out that I was pregnant with my youngest child. Then my marriage came to its first separation, and I ended up moving out to Newfoundland with my mom and her significant other. Things were good. At this point in our lives, my dad was still around. He was back in our lives. He was sober. He had sat down and had a conversation with both, my mom and I, and apologized and let both my mom and I say what we needed to get off of our chests so that we could close that chapter and move on with our lives in a good way. My ex-husband and I had decided that we were gonna reconcile our marriage. My dad, at that point in time, had gotten ill with cancer, so we decided that he would leave Sudbury, I would leave Newfoundland, and we would get together in Toronto, Ontario, and that's what we did. And then shortly after my daughter was born, um, we ended up moving out of my dad's place, and my mom and her significant other moved in with us. And we had, again, my mom was on her medication. She was at a very good point in her life, and she was a great grandmother. Like, she really was. Like, she loved her grandchildren to pieces, both of them. She always wanted to have grandchildren. She was very excited to be a grandmother. And I feel blessed that I was able to give her that because she went through a lot in life and she deserved to be a grandmother and she deserved to have a second chance, just like most of us wish that we could do if we were grandparents, right? To do right by our grandchildren the way that we weren't able to do right by our own children. And she did her best. She really did. And then my marriage ended, and I ended up leaving Toronto um, with my daughter and moving back to Sudbury, Ontario. And shortly after, my mom and her significant other ended up moving back as well. And again, everything was going well until it wasn't. And they started having relationship issues. And when their relationship ended, my mom went right back downhill from there. And I don't lay any blame whatsoever on her significant other because they themselves were struggling, and I know what it's like trying to help my mom when she's down and out, when her schizophrenia is just too much. So, although I was very upset that I felt like I was left holding the bag after their relationship ended, I was very angry for a little while about that. And I realized a few years later that I understood why they did what they did, why they left the relationship, why they put an end to it, because I know what it's like dealing with my mom when she's down and out. So I get it. I really do. Probably wasn't easy for them to walk away, but they did what they had to do. And unfortunately, my mom spiraled and went downhill from there. And that's when she ended up back in a mental institute. She ended up back in a mental institute. And then after they released her from there, she had nowhere to go. She had lost her apartment and moved in with myself and my children. And I woke up one night in the middle of the night to my mother holding a butcher knife over me and my children. And then I sent my children to go live with their fathers. And then I lived with my mom for a little bit and took care of her um, until I couldn't anymore. I just she ended up back in the hospital, and I couldn't do it anymore. I literally went up to the hospital with my children. I made sure that she was not having shock therapy that day because I didn't want my children to have to feel rejected by their grandmother because she didn't know who they were because she had gone through shock therapy that day. I called up to make sure that she was having a good day before I brought my children up there. And then I said goodbye to my mom, and my children did not know that that's what was going on. But I wanted to bring them up there to see their grandmother one last time because I didn't know when the next time was going to be that we would see her. And I cut my ties because I wasn't going to allow the government or the doctors or whoever to force me to take my mom in again and have to go through all of that. And that's where the decision was made that she would be put into long-term care. She ended up in the hospital because she wasn't taking care of herself. And I was with my now husband at that point in time. And we ended up getting a phone call from her caretaker that she lived with. And the caretaker was mentioning that mom wasn't doing well and that she wasn't taking care of herself and that she had gotten very, very ill because she wasn't cleaning herself and physically like taking showers and stuff because she couldn't. She was having a hard time doing that. So she ended up in the hospital, and that's where we decided that no, she was not going to come live with me. She was going to go into a long-term care because it was going to get to a point where she was going to require a wheelchair, and I couldn't do this anymore. I had done it for 20 some odd years already, and it was just to a point where I didn't have a home. I didn't own a home where I could accommodate my mom living with me and my husband. It just wasn't feasible at that point in time. So she went to live in a long-term care home, and that's where she stayed for about 15 years before she passed away last year. And you would think that with her being under full-time care with, nurses and doctors and all that at this long-term home, that she would not be suicidal. But you're wrong. She used to pretend that she swallowed her pills. She'd hide them, save them up, and then pop them all. And then she'd be off to the hospital, have her stomach pumped, make sure she was okay, back to the nursing home. And it only happened a couple of times while she was there, thankfully. They literally started making her show them that she actually took the pills and checked her mouth and everything. Like it got pretty intense for a little while. But after that she stopped trying to commit suicide. I was probably in my mid-30s. So at least 20 years of my mom being suicidal every other day, sometimes every other month. Sometimes, if we were lucky, there was a year or two gap in between. When I was younger, my mom always made me promise that I would never put her in a nursing home, that I would never let her die alone. When she passed away last year, she had been in a nursing home for 15 years. I was carried a lot of guilt about that, especially after we were back on our feet and we decided to make the move out here to New Brunswick. When I came out here in 2018 after finding my mom's adopted family, we had a great visit until we didn't, until I found out about my mom and dad being biological brother and sister. So I went back to Ontario, I'm gonna say a little pissed off that after all these years of my dad being gone, that my mom didn't finally just tell me the truth so that I could deal with it then and not now. But at the same time, all I wanted to do was bring my mom home because my mom is from Moncton. She was born and raised in Moncton. So my biggest goal was to be able to bring her home. She had one of her siblings from her adopted family that was in a nursing home just up the road, maybe like a 5-minute drive, if that, from where we live. So the goal was to bring mom home. So in 2019, after having all the paperwork filled out, um, we were going to do what was called an interprovincial transfer. Because mom was born and raised here in New Brunswick, they were going to allow us to transfer her from Ontario to a nursing home that would be at the same level of care here as what it is in Ontario for her. And for us, it was very exciting to find out that the home that her sibling was in at the time was one of those homes that we could also put mom in. Now, her sibling that was in the nursing home had dementia, and she had been there an extended number of years herself as well. So whether or not, she would have ever recognized mom had we been able to bring mom home, I don't know. But it would have been cool to find out. Really would have. So we had everything, all the forms that we needed. We informed the nursing home in Sudbury that she was living in and what was going on, not to tell her anything because we were trying our best to hopefully get her out there as soon as possible. The sooner the better. But then there were stipulations that we had to get past for this to happen. And one of the biggest ones was us moving out here. So in 2019, we bought our home and we moved out here. We came out here March the 1st was our official date of us moving into our home here in Moncton, which we still live in to this day. We went and spoke with the nursing home. We had all the paperwork that we required. Everything was set in stone. We're ready to go. The only other little thing that was stopping us was when it was going to happen because there was still, because it was a special exception for mom to be transferred from Ontario to here, we had to wait on availability of a bed at that specific nursing home. And it was taking a little longer than we anticipated. And then COVID hit in 2020, and the whole world just got shut down. There were no interprovincial transfers that were going to happen. You had to stay within a certain amount of people, trying to get in to see a loved one at a nursing home, next to impossible. There was no way we were getting from New Brunswick to Ontario to go visit during that time. So because COVID shut the world down, a lot of people that were living in nursing homes, like my mom, became even more isolated. And I tried during that time to call her more, to communicate with her as much as possible, because I didn't want her to feel like we had forgotten about her, because we hadn't. And her schizophrenia kicked in again. And at this point in time, she was already fighting schizophrenia and dementia. So it was even a bigger struggle for me mentally to try and prepare myself to have a conversation with her on a more frequent basis than I normally would. And it became a point where I went from calling every day to check in to calling every second day to check in, calling every weekend to check in, because her isolation became so much for her and for her schizophrenia that she literally blamed me for COVID. She accused me that I created COVID, that I shut the world down so that I would never have to be near her again. I shut the world down so that I wouldn't have to be responsible to bring her home. I didn't create COVID. And I knew that, by all means, but at the same time, it was very, very difficult to try to reason with her and tell her, Mom, no, I didn't do this. I didn't create COVID. I want you to come home. We are still working on getting you here. But because it took so long for the world to recover from the whole COVID, by the time that things started to clear up again, where COVID was no longer a, a big issue, COVID no longer had the world shut down. People could go visit, you can go shopping again, you could travel again. The whole world was back to normal. And at the same time, for a lot of other things, it wasn't back to normal. And although we still hoped that one day we would be able to get Mom out here before her time came that she passed, it was very heartbreaking knowing that it's something that could never happen. We still hoped to be able to get Mom back out here to Moncton, but we never heard anything back from the government agency that was taking care of this. So at that point, there was still a lot of people here in Moncton that were in need of going into a long-term care home. So because there were so many people still actively waiting after COVID, Mom's submission got pushed back a little further, to a point where we had honestly thought that it had been canceled. I got a call last year in June from the nurse's station from the nurse that was taking care of my mom to let me know she wasn't doing well, and they wanted to send her up to the hospital, so I said, "Yeah, absolutely." Mom got up there, they thought that she was having heart issues, and after running some tests, they found out that she was actually full of cancer. So I got a call from the doctor at the hospital to let me know, and we talked about chemotherapy and radiation and all that stuff. And unfortunately, because the cancer was everywhere, putting mom through chemotherapy like dad went through wasn't worth it. Trying to do radiation was only going to prolong the fact that she was going to die anyway. She was full of cancer. She had it in her lungs, her stomach, kidneys, her pancreas. It was everywhere. So I had to make the decision because I'm power of attorney for mom. I had to make the decision with the doctor to start end of life care treatment for her. And it broke me. It broke me to think that I was not going to be there to hold her hand when she took her last breath. Not because I didn't want to be there. It was a very tough time. I'm not able to drive, not able to fly. Could have taken a bus. Then I would have had to have taken time off work. No money coming in. Just a very tough overall situation. By the time I would have made it there, I wouldn't have made it there in time. I was very, very fortunate that my daughter was there for her grandmother. And I know that my other child would have been there as well if they could have been, but living in British Columbia, it's just like us living in New Brunswick. It's not easy to get to at a drop of a hat. So we ended up doing FaceTime. We ended up, in a group chat. It was a long week for all of us, but mostly a lot more so for my daughter that was there with her grandmother while her grandmother was passing. And because my daughter is a nurse and she was taking care of people that were, at the end of their life, um, she knew exactly what was going to happen and how it was going to happen. So it was easier for us, myself, my husband, our youngest child, and partner to understand what mom was going through and what stages she was at. And I found it comforting knowing that mom was being taken care of by someone that loved her. And I felt comforted knowing that although I could not be there because of my mom's dementia, a lot of times she would see my daughter and think that it was me. So I hope that although it was my daughter that was there, I hope that she, got to see that little flash of me as well before she passed away. And since then, I've been very up and down emotionally, trying to figure out who I am and what now, because I don't have that I don't have that responsibility anymore. Everything about my parents, everything about my mom and dad is officially done. Dad passed away in 1993. I was able to heal through all the crap that he put us through. Um, the sexual abuse, all of it. I was able to heal past all of that. And now I'm starting to heal through my mom's story because she just passed away in June of last year. And I've been doing a lot of reflecting on, the good times, the bad times. And there's still a lot of things in between that I'm trying to put together. And as I'm doing this, I'm I'm able to let go and finally close that chapter of childhood abandonment and schizophrenia that wasn't mine. I'm able to close that door down. And that is so freeing to not have that big responsibility anymore. Big time freeing. But now I'm starting to journey back again. And although I'm not hurt by the sexual abuse and the torture and the schizophrenia, I'm still very hurt by a lot of other things that I still trying to figure out. And every night for the past couple of every night for the past couple of weeks now, I've been having these random flashes, and then I wake up at like 3 o'clock in the morning and I can't sleep. And then I start reminiscing through what that flashback was. And it hurts. And it's very frustrating because I feel like there's so much of my life that just flew over my head because of all the lies that my parents told for all these years about who they were, that they weren't a married couple, that they were actual biological brother and sister. And now that that chapter, now that that chapter of my life is closed and is done with, I still feel like I'm left holding the bag a little bit because there's still some things that I need to work through. There's still questions that I have, but there's also a lot that I'm realizing the why things happened the way they did when I was a kid. So, as I continue to pick at these different little pieces of the puzzle and try to patch them together, because I've definitely had moments in time that were incorrect because of the trauma that I went through. For example, just a very simple example, I remember being young and being at my grandparents' farm, and I thought that I was playing with the friend that lived next door, and that her and I had gotten in trouble because we were eating those milk bone dog biscuits. Because the dog kept getting treats, and we were trying to figure out why the dog enjoyed them so much, so we thought that we would try them. And we got caught. And we got in trouble. And then in 2018, when I came back to New Brunswick with my husband, I was sitting across the table from the person that story actually happened with. And I was like, Wait, what? That was you? That very same night at that family dinner in 2018, one of my other cousins was going to surprise me with someone that she lived um with us in Sudbury, Ontario, and I didn't even remember this guy at all. It took me almost 2 weeks to even remember that they lived with us in Sudbury, Ontario. Because at that point in time, after they left and came back to New Brunswick, my mom had tried to kill herself. So they got completely wiped out of my memory, unfortunately, until I was faced with it again. Just like, the cousin that I ended up thinking was the little girl that lived next door that I was eating these dog biscuits with. So because I've had a lot of memories resurface and I've had to replay them back in my mind and get the accurate information in there to process it, I'm still doing a lot of that right now with the fact that we moved around so much when I was a child. I'm talking like from the age of 4 until the age of 13. I attended at least 12 to 15 schools because we moved around that much. So, and for years, I grew up feeling like what they used to call, and I apologize now if it's not the correct term, but they used to call them army brats, kids that their parents or a parent was in the army and they moved from one location to another often. So I felt very much like these children my entire life because we moved all the time. And I was honestly led to believe it was because of the job that my dad did. My dad was a welder, so he was high in demand, and we moved around a lot because of that. Well, that's a lie. And I'm just now at that point where I'm having flashbacks and again reconnecting things that I was lied to about for many of years and healing through that part of it now. So, although I am still hurt by the fact that my mom is no longer here, I'm very much at peace that that huge responsibility is over with. I'm very much at peace with her not suffering anymore. All I've ever wanted was for her mind to be quiet so that it wasn't antagonizing her all the time, so that it wasn't bringing her down and depressing her, because I always wondered what it would have been like hearing the voices in her head and what they were saying. But now I'm able to put that part behind me. But I'm still at the age of 53, going on 54, I am still healing through other parts of my life that made no sense to me. And thankfully, again, because I healed through a lot of the traumatic part of it, my mind's not really going there anymore. So, or if that, a bit or piece of that trauma is involved in the part that I'm trying to heal from, it's not there as long as it used to be. It's not a constant reminder. It's a quick flash. Oh, yeah, okay, that was that. Okay. And then I can kind of piece the rest of it together because I already know what happened then. I don't have to revisit that part of it, but I need to move on and finish healing from the rest of this so that I can get on with my life. And it's not a very easy thing to do, but I'm getting there. And it's totally worth it. I feel like such a different person altogether. I don't even feel like Danielle anymore. I don't know. I feel completely different than what I used to. I'm not that broken little girl anymore, and I'm not that person that has to hold on to these deep, dark secrets anymore because as a child, we were very much raised as children were to be seen and not heard. And now many of people my age are healing through their past and finally stepping up and having the courage to tell their stories. And it's pretty empowering to watch so many people at the beginning of their journey, where I was many years ago, the ones that are still figuring it out but are almost there, the ones like me that we feel through a lot, there's still a little bit left to go. And then all the ones that have got through it all, the one I inspire to be. Take care. We'll talk next week.